No, this is just a mic check, but we'll just treat it as if I'm doing the whole thing. Alright, the mic's working. Let's see if the mic is working. Well, like I said before, I don't believe you get to 400 pounds by mistake. And when it comes with massive weight loss, there's usually a lot of reflection you have to do, a lot of looking inside. And so when you look inside, what exactly do you find? How far do you need to look? Just how deep do you need to go into this darkness? Well, I guess it's time for me to explore that. But let's go back to the beginning. Maybe a little bit before the weight loss, around the age of 8, where I actually started to gain weight. At the same time, that's where I would hit puberty. And I noticed a few things. I would use food as a coping mechanism. And then from there, we start to really understand. And I get to really wonder about the darkness of weight loss. When I was in school, I did a lot of activities growing up. I was in AP classes, I did chorus, student body president, played in multiple sports, competed in powerlifting. I mentioned I did football, did track and field, honor societies, beta club. I did a lot of things, but there was a reason why I did a lot of things, other than just being active, which it had its place. I enjoyed doing a lot of things being active. But another thing that kind of came from that, while being active, in many different areas, both academically and sport-wise, was, for lack of better terms, I was running. So as the active child, the middle one, excelled both athletically and in academia, what exactly could I be running from? And why would I choose those avenues? Well, there was a lot for me to do that, and at the time, I didn't really consider looking that far in. But then as I grew older and as I gained weight, and then I decided I wanted to lose that weight, that's when I realized, oh, I've been hiding a lot more than I wanted to admit. And I wanted to find out what exactly it was. But if we look at the start of what led to this late game, the gain of all that, going through all this, having all these accolades, being so successful, right, was the reward. I grew up in pretty rural South Carolina, not necessarily destitute, but I wasn't exactly affluent by all means. So in some cases, when we were rewarded, me and my brothers, for doing things, it was usually food. That was how love was shown. And I'm not talking like apple slice. Although I did enjoy a good bag of spinach, I'm talking like KFC, Chick-fil-A, Burger King, McDonald's. And if we were really feeling it, well, it was like the end of the semester, and it was really good. Golden Corral. That was one of my weaknesses. But in all honesty here, how much can we really blame that? We consider the US society and cultures of the Deep South, we use food as a reward, as love. And we use it surrounding almost every event, whether it be a holiday, sporting event, like get together, funerals in a lot of cases. Heck, I do it from my own time from the many game nights I host. So the thing is, who can we really blame if this is the start of the weight gain? So then we have to wonder, this may not be the only factor, but what other ones could have contributed? With that being said, as I mentioned, I use all these activities and then hiding behind food as a coping mechanism to run. One would hope that if you're running, there's a destination, right? So the next thing I wonder is what happens when the childlike hope dies? What happens when that dream that you've grown up career-wise fades away? And so the first thing we can get to look at is here. is growing up, I've gone through a few career paths. One of the first career paths I wanted to do was be a chef. And then I, funnily enough, switched from chef to, let's do astrophysics. That's quite a big jump. So that's my aspirations. Holding it up from pretty early, maybe mid to late elementary school. And I carried that dream through middle school and into high school. And by the time I got to high school, when I really got to like AP Calculus, I started to realize that, I don't know, this is kind of hard. Smart, sure, I would consider myself that. Intelligent, I don't know. When I look at intelligence seems natural, a little bit more intuitive, if that makes sense. I consider those who may be intelligent where they don't need to really study per se. At least not as hard as the smart one may need to. They tend to find it naturally to read patterns, read people, learn emotions, understand nature in a way that they can solve big problems, grand issues. But that's not what I saw in myself. And I started to realize that with my ability to understand math. And so I was holding on to this dream, I believe, futilely for a very long time. And then I realized near the end of my high school career, when I was denied from probably my dream school, MIT. That was another one that just kind of nailed it right in. And I was like, okay, South Carolina it is, University of South Carolina. And in the first year and a half is when I started to really discover that this is not for me. So I began to go into a career crisis. And in that career crisis, I jumped around from higher education. I jumped around from psychology, a little bit of, heck, I don't even remember what the third option was at the time. So I chose the psychology route. I was like, okay, let's go about helping those with eating disorders or things of that nature, right? That's what I really wanted to go for. So I jumped around from eating disorders, maybe something else. That's what I wanted to kind of help out with. Because I started to realize that I don't think I'm cut out for physics. And that was a very hard pill for me to swallow. The dream, the goal that I had since I was a child, I felt like I couldn't keep up. And then from there, I would take my psych route and then end up in Texas, carry that there, and realize I don't want to do sports psych. But with having lost the weight for the most part of this time, I decided, why not exercise physiology? And so I chose that. And I enjoy coaching, I really do. I enjoy what I've learned, I enjoy continuing to learn, and I enjoy helping athletes get better. But a part of me still feels like this is, at least in the physics sense, a cheap knockoff of what I felt like I couldn't grasp. And with that being said, this is only one of the aspects that led to this. My weight loss, the end of my weight loss, my weight gain, all the same. And so now I wonder, well, what else? And so with what else? Because I hid, where you are is important. And let's just say the closet gets pretty dark. From where we are now, one thing I would kind of ask or say, career-wise, growing up in certain situations, being food is sometimes a reward. The next thing you could ask is, What else would make the sun fall, I guess? Would you say it'd be the inability to be in a, what's the word I want to use? The ideal relationship. At least one hoped for by family and friends at the time. Until you start to realize that that ideal relationship, that doesn't match up with maybe your version of it. And so, with that being said, I grew up as a Jehovah's Witness. Regardless of any intent or the view of that no longer exactly being a part of it, a lot of that foundation still stuck. And I would still consider myself a Christian. And I, here on video, will still openly declare that for me, my God, Jehovah Jireh, I will say his name, and a believer in his son, Jesus Christ. But a lot of those things I learned along those ways, they carry with me. And Jehovah's Witnesses were, I will say, respectfully, very straightforward. They didn't tend to sugarcoat a lot of biblical stories, even the children. And for me, good old Sodom and Gomorrah. And a lot of that I still remember, other than on my own studies, that I do daily. Read my Bible daily. But I started to wonder, if we go back, it's the beginning where all this started at the age of 8, when I hit puberty. I began to notice, I see guys a bit differently, and not what most expected. So, I tried to hide it off, evaluate it a bit. Maybe it's a phase, or maybe I'm trying to understand what emotions I'm feeling. What's the difference between a platonic or romantic friendship? Maybe I'm evaluating her body and not necessarily having this sort of attraction. Until I got to high school and I realized that wasn't the case. But at least for the time, I stayed pretty hidden. And once again, not choosing the best mechanism, I chose food as the way to cope with it. Because in my mind, especially through middle school, I was pretty aware of the LGBTQ+, the gay community's standards, and one of them being, you're a certain size, nothing's gonna happen. So I realized, well, if that's the case, I can use the standard in my favor while trying to figure things out. So avoiding leading into temptation, why not make myself undesirable? That was the standard. It's not like most guys are willing to want to sleep with someone else that's pretty big, not exactly muscular and strong. So why not make myself unfavorable? That's the word I'll use. And from there, I wouldn't have to worry about anything. I can once again push it off and run. And we also know, being big, run isn't exactly fun. So I didn't get very far. But that was the route I chose until I realized that I don't want to be this big anymore. So what do I do then? This is something I have to face. Do I need to quit running? And then recognizing that I can't use food as a mechanism for coping. What now? And so continuing along with my faith through all this, I still read. However, I still did not choose the best methods. And this would lead to other situations, especially when losing weight. You start to go around different things. You find a substitute for food. And you have to be very careful about that. Because with that, we lead to our next major driver, our next important part of the story, the legacy of the knife. When it came to the very early stages of the weight loss, I chuckled, but by no means was it healthy. I mentioned in part one that lunch was like 2 bologna sandwiches, which at my size, then and even now, that's adorable for lunch. Not really nutrient filled. But with all that being said, I talked about that in detail. The purpose of this was it wasn't healthy. I would consume about somewhere between 1,500 and 2,000 calories a day, which is not enough, especially being about nearly 400. And I was active, and like I said, the heat of Columbia, South Carolina, my caloric burn could be projected somewhere between 45 and maybe 5,500 calories. Um, and that also depending on the exercise I did for that day. So I wasn't eating a lot to begin with, and that carried on for at least within that first year of the weight loss. And then I started to be a little better about nutrition and how I actually ate while exercising and competing and lifting, choosing a different route with the weight loss. That being said, during that time, as I removed food, that would require other coping mechanisms or different outcomes with food that I didn't plan on. One of them being I essentially binged. Granted, binging was a factor from when I first gained weight, but this one was a little different. I would kind of not fast in the terms of, oh, I want to control my appetite. I'd fast in the terms of, maybe I'm going to eat later or go somewhere. So why not just don't eat for the day? But that would result in engorging myself later at night. Usually alone, sometimes around. Like I realized it was a social eater, but I still had a limit on it. But no, mostly it was alone in my room with copious amounts of food. And this is where I also would find my love for good old Reese's peanut butter cups. There were nights that I would walk to CVS. Now, my friends were asleep. We were talking about like maybe 12, 1 in the morning, and I would go buy maybe 2 6-packs of Reese's. You gotta imagine that there's a pair that comes in the actual container, and I'm not sponsored by Reese's, by the way. But during that time, I would walk to CVS, and then I would walk back to my room, and then I would eat the entire thing, and then go about my day as if nothing happened, or the night at least, and then the next day as if I didn't just do that. And so that was what I did. But eventually that would go a bit further between the excessive exercising that would follow, sometimes hitting 2 a days, 3 a days if I really were feeling bad about how I ate. That would be a method I chose. Sometimes even if it meant forcing whatever food I ate in the copious amounts to make a return, if that sort of makes sense, manually, so that I kind of, in a way, avoided the caloric bomb of all the food I just ate. But those weren't the only measures. A lot of this time, especially since when I was removing food, I realized a lot of things emotionally, so I kind of shut out. And that would lead to different avenues of exploring those emotions. And like I mentioned, that would be the legacy of the knife. And that would involve essentially harming myself on purpose, cutting the skin. But I never did it anywhere obvious, or at least anywhere that couldn't be hidden by fabrics of clothes, or which eventually be hidden. The first, I guess, set of them by my tattoo, the placement of that was no mistake. But I did a lot of thinking of it before these scars were even ever implemented on my body. It was a tattoo I always wanted. The placement of it was just decided by essentially a shame factor for the most part. I used it as a shield, a reminder. But it was a reminder that didn't hold up as strong as I thought. And so continuing the 5 years, I would take my effect somewhere else. But there's no cause for concern. I've kind of moved past that point now. But with that and all these coping mechanisms, because I moved away from that one, that would lead to another. And a part of that was drinking. I never considered myself one who consumed alcohol, but near the latter end of this sort of weight loss journey, it became a different sort of coping mechanism. As I traveled through these, I started to understand why people get sucked into the different habits. And so with that, I realized that, there are a lot of emotions tend to be hidden from, and there's a way to go about them. And sometimes the self-destructive modes aren't the best. And generally fare off with this one. I usually try to avoid drinking in this case because of the other ones, it definitely messed with the gains as I got close to wanting to learn how to body build and played around with that. Alcohol, not exactly not good for the gains, not good for the protein and this, trying to build big muscle, not good for that. So put a cap on that. And so that would just be another factor that I would learn about while going through this weight loss, is that the different methods, the destructive methods, a lot of coping mechanisms come out when you realize how much you use food as the main source of that. But that doesn't necessarily mean this is all bad, because I have lost the weight now and I've found better coping mechanisms between walking, different meditating. I mentioned my faith and I keep to that. That helps me a lot. But with all that culminating now with me being at a lower weight in a much more stable position, the question I generally ask for myself is, well, what next? After all of this progress, I ask what's next. I have a bunch of loose skin, which I would be lying if I said didn't bother me from time to time. However, I also view it as a scar, but not a scar that I look at with pity or maybe hatred. It's more of a kind of like a reward. That makes sense. It's a reminder of how far I've come, the progress I've made. And so with that, I'm relatively happy with the outcome that I've gotten, the results that I've gotten from my years of learning, some of the mistakes, the progress, what I've gone through to get here. But that doesn't mean I don't want to remove it. And I have plans to. Right now there are other things that call to my attention, so it's not the main focus. And I'm still wanting to test out how my body looks and fills out, and how I cut and bulk in different phases with the skin before I consider getting it removed. But like I said, it's not all bad. It's not all doom and gloom. Having said everything that I have and being to this point, there are some bright sides that come from losing weight. There are some good things that come. And I want to get to that. And like I said, I want to explore the more happy outcomes of losing nearly 180 pounds. But I guess that would be saved for the bright side of weight loss.